So last week I pitched my startup idea, and it didn't go too well, which honestly was not that surprising. If you've ever watched someone explain a half formed product idea to a room full of people who all have LinkedIn titles, you know the look, the polite nodding, the interesting face, the silence afterward. Statistically speaking, this is probably the most startup accurate thing that could have happened. You pitch, it flops, you tell yourself it was still good practice. But for some reason, it's not really stopping me. So instead of doing the healthy thing, like reconsidering my life choices, I've decided to build it anyway. This is week 1 of coding what is, in my head, still a bazillion-dollar startup. Day 1. There's a rule in startups that nobody really writes down, but everyone follows. Before it works, it has to look like it works. So the first thing I built wasn't functionality, it wasn't logic, it wasn't even the product. It was a landing page. Specifically, the finance guy converting landing page for better customers. And naturally, instead of doing it myself, I decided I should probably check v0.dev first. And it did, it built it for me, technically. But the result was pretty bad. Like this website is about to steal your credit card information type of bad. The fonts were wrong, the spacing was wrong, everything was wrong in a way that felt stupid. So I did something I wasn't planning on doing this early. I actually sat down and started coding. Nothing impressive, no clever abstractions, just layout, spacing, structure, enough to make it look like a real human had touched it at some point. I still used AI for some of the components like this iPhone mockup, the graph, and most of the text on the screen. I might not be a hero, but at least I have standards. They're just very low. But after a few hours of fixing things that shouldn't have been broken in the first place, it finally started to look real. Not just good, but real. And that was enough. By day 2, the website looked legit, which immediately became a problem because it didn't actually do anything yet. There was an input field, a button, but it was all pure theater. So I decided to finally wire the button to a function which called an API, and the API saved data to an actual database that goes by the name of Neon. And suddenly, oh my god, it works? No errors, no explosions, no mystery warnings. I refreshed the page, the data was there. Initially, I was really excited. Then, I felt a bit nervous, because now I couldn't pretend this was just a concept anymore. The landing page was done, which meant that now I could market this, which then meant I had to actually start the app. And that's where things usually start to fall apart. Alright, so it's finally day 3. Before writing any code, I did what every serious founder does. I talked to ChatGPT to validate my delusions. We went back and forth on the MVP, features, screens, user flow. Anything that felt unnecessary got cut, and anything that was really unrealistic and ambitious somehow stayed. So, classic founder behavior. Once I had something that looked reasonable on paper, I took it back to v0.dev and got it to generate some basic app designs. They were fine, not particularly impressive, but they were usable, which in startup terms means good enough to move on for now. I told myself I'd clean it up later. I don't know when that's gonna happen though. On day 4, I decided to start doing things properly again. That was my first mistake. I built the first screen using React Native reusables and a bunch of just React Native stuff, and it worked. Eventually, it took me an entire day just to build this one home screen. Not because it was complex, but because everything required just a little bit more effort than I wanted to give. I thought this would be just like web dev, but it's still pretty hard to convert that Next.js knowledge over to React Native. By the end of the day, I had something that technically functioned, and 2 realizations. 1, this was completely not scalable in the time frame I'm working on, and 2, I'm not built for this type of shit, man. I told myself this was the right way to do it, then immediately decided I am not going to be doing that again. So on day 5, I decided to try something else. I took screenshots of the designs from V0 and I fed them to Cloud. And then I asked it to generate the code. And guys, it worked. Like, it really worked. 2 days of work, done in about half an hour, on a free subscription. I mean, the code wasn't perfect, but it was good, and it was way better than what I would have probably written anyway. And at this point, I wasn't really impressed, I was uncomfortable, because software development suddenly felt like less a skill and more like a suggestion. I immediately assumed my career was over, before, considering pivoting to farming. Okay, day 6. Today I'm planning on just building out the backend, which is always where confidence goes to die. So, to begin with, I spun up Supabase because I've used it before. I set up tables, added triggers, connected it to the front end, and nothing worked. Perfect. That's great, I was low-key expecting that. It's fine. I asked Cloud, And he was confused too, which is really reassuring. I spent hours during this day debugging things that should have been obvious: permissions, keys, silent failures, the worst kind. By the end of the day, I had accomplished almost nothing, which leads me to the final day of absolute BS. On day 7, my cousin signs up for the waitlist on the website. Go check it out, financeguy.app, by the way. And he told me it didn't work, which is annoying because I was pretty sure it did work. Turns out it does work. Neon saves the email when they enter it and press a button. There's just no visual confirmation on the website. Just this tiny little line of text that, disappears after 2 seconds. It's barely visible and something no human would ever notice. So I spent the day doing very important startup work. I added a toast notification, made the success state obvious, set up confirmation emails, all the things you only remember after someone tells you it's broken. And then, when the day was coming to an end, after coding all these UX improvements to the waitlist landing page, I realized the real problem for my backend. This entire damn time, I had been using the wrong Supabase keys. See, there's 2 types of keys on Supabase, as you can see right here. I was using these ones. These are the newer, supported ones. Unfortunately, I can only code with these ones, the legacy Anon keys. So once I switched to them, everything worked instantly, because of course it did. And so I spent the final hours of the day cleaning up triggers, adding helper functions, finally connecting the backend and the front end together. The thing worked quietly and honestly probably reluctantly. And that was week 1. No users yet, no revenue, no bazillion dollars, just a startup that technically exists. Well, barely. But that's kind of the point. I wanted to make this video to show you what it actually looks like. No cafe spots or anything like that. No pitch decks, no demo videos. Just a series of small decisions, dumb mistakes, and even accidental progresses. Next week, this either turns into something real or I find out why most startups die right here. Probably both. But yeah, anyway, I'm probably going to be keeping you guys updated. Go sign up for the waitlist, financeguy.app. The link will be in the description. Self-plug. Like and subscribe, yada yada. I don't know. I'll be posting more of these videos. Bye.